Hello. This is going to be the re-recording of the Sarah Boone sentencing of today, December 1st, out of Orange County Courthouse in Florida, in Orlando, Florida, with Judge Michael Kraynick presiding. We're going to be presenting the whole thing quietly. You'll see my avatar in the corner. The audio and all did have a little bit of buffering, and I just want to make sure there's an absolute clear recording from the start that you all can refer back to because of the certain issues that we had as we were going. So, without further ado, let's just make sure that that is all playing accordingly. We'll get it up and get that done. They're going to be testing the audio in a second, so watch your headphones. Well, Sarah Boone should be coming into the courtroom shortly. Today, representing Sarah Boone will be James Owens. I did not see in the proceedings the other two attorneys, Mr. Henderson or the one from Arizona, and for the life of me, his name escapes me right now. My apologies. I will put it in the description for you later. He was not there, nor was Tony Henderson, but Mr. Owens was there to represent for Sarah Boone, as well as many. There will be many not witness, but testimonies on her behalf, statements, both by video and in person for Sarah Boone. Representing the state was Mr. J and Mr. Cacciatore from the prosecutor's office. They were both there, as well as the family of Jorge Torres. I saw his brother. I saw his daughters. I saw his mom. Um, and there will be testimony both by video and in person from them also. This style of hearing, both the state and the defense are actually helping the witnesses by asking questions to get information out, and they will also make statements to the judge in regards to the case from both sides on how they feel are the important issues of sentencing to focus on. I was not used to the back and forth. Um, it was different for me. I had not seen it before, but I do understand it is part of how it can be done. And, obviously it does allow for more information to get in. It just seemed a little weird that if you're making a statement on behalf of someone, you need to be cued on the information. Um, but I do understand that it does help to get everything that the defense or the prosecution wants put on the record on the record. Uh, Everyone giving a statement today needed to be sworn in, including Sarah Boone herself. And throughout this proceeding in tours, you will see a statement from Sarah Boone. She does take the stand and she gives a what she calls edited version of a statement that she wrote out, and then she just gives her oral argument on her own behalf, so to speak. I will say I was very surprised to see what good spirits she appeared to be in as she came in and smiled. Uh, I do believe that that is the paralegal from Mr. Owens' office behind her, the young little blonde woman, the blonde attorney, paralegal or attorney, I'm not sure, that assisted during the case. And she spent a lot of time talking with Sarah. It seemed like she genuinely was smiling at her. I'm going to let this play through, but this part of the video is just a lot of waiting for George Kraynick to finish up another case. You'll see Sarah and her attorney looking at things through the phone in regards to statements. Sarah was very concerned that many of the letters that she had asked to be sent forward, that she was in contact with people that said they were sending letters, persons on her behalf statements on her behalf that were to be entered into the record for Judge Kraynick to read. She wanted to make sure that those were there. There was emails as well as video statements by a friend of hers that she wanted to make sure was on record. She was just in Sarah Boone's own way, dotting her I's and crossing her T's to make sure everything that was possible to be there for her defense was there. We see here the Torres family. I can see Mrs. Torres. I can see his sister, brother, daughters. Representing for Sarah Boone is only Mr. Owens today. As you can see, both computers open on the prosecution table, and that is Mr. J and Mr. Cacciatore, who we saw daily. We saw them both, and especially the closing arguments. I was quite impressed by Mr. Cacciatore and Mr. J. On a side note, we do know that James Owens has already sent in motions for a retrial to the appellate, to the higher court, stating that George Kraynick had made several errors during the trial. The first one making Sarah pro se, the second one denying his motion for additional time to push the trial so he could prepare, and the third in not declaring a mistrial when the family of George Torres became audibly upset during the presentation of the video in front of the jury. We all witnessed that back and forth with the judge and Mr. Owens, and he was given an opportunity and several ways to resolve it, but he only wanted a mistrial. In my opinion, as a good defense attorney would, as I've seen in the past, he definitely knew from the start when he was denied time to prepare, regardless of the previous order that the judge had put in place, and regardless of being reminded by Mr. Owens that that was available for him to know ahead of time, and he took the case on anyway. He knew he was going to appeal on just that issue right there, and the fact that she was pro se. This case has been not exactly standard from the start. It's been quite tumultuous. There's many delays, multiple defense attorneys. We had the first defense attorney leave 2 weeks before trial. Maurice Padillo asked to be removed from the case because of a disagreement with Sarah Boone on how the defense should be represented. And I do believe it was because he didn't want to go forward with the battered woman syndrome defense. And she was insisting. And in my humble opinion, although we have never had anything put in writing to show it, I do believe several of the other attorneys left over the same issue. They were trying to show her the risks. They were trying to tell her it may not play out in her defense, and it would be better to accept the manslaughter plea or to at least come up with another defense that was at least remorseful in some way. It seemed very important to Sarah during the trial, especially we noticed by how they presented everything and her own statements when she took the stand in the hearing, that it was important that she be seen what she went through. And I can understand that based on the type of relationship that her and the victim, George Torres, had. It was tumultuous. It was upsetting. There was definitely abuse on both sides. Well, she never acknowledged what she did about it. And I think that became a problem. I know it's something I saw. And I do believe it's something the jury saw. Well, she has been convicted of second-degree murder, even though she was offered a 15-year manslaughter plea during the trial. And now she's here for a sentencing hearing, which has a minimum of 22 and a half years, as Judge Kraynick had explicitly went out of his way to make sure she understood before declining, for the record, that plea deal. For many of us, we think this is the end when we hear the sentencing. But with two different types of appeals that can go forward now. The one for the retrial and then the one on the sentencing. That she would, I do believe she will have maybe 30 or 45 days after sentencing to submit an appeal based on the sentencing guidelines that are here in Florida, in the Florida courts system. And whether she does that or not, she would be, I do believe, because she's indigent, she would be appointed an appeal attorney, but it's a different process. She would not get any from the prosecutor's office, the public defender's office, and or her private attorney, Mr. Owens. She needs an appellate lawyer for this, and I do believe the court has a way to assign one for her, but I'm sure Judge Kraynick will address that. I will admit to always being surprised by Sarah Boone's demeanor. Everyone's different. I mean, I cannot actually judge her for how she handles stress or something as ominous as a sentencing hearing, on where she'll be spending like a large a large number of her years coming forward. I don't know if I could be so easygoing about it as she entered that courtroom with that big grin. The victim's family is very somber. This has to be very difficult for them. In a way, this is their justice. This is when they get to speak. They get to come forward and say how this has affected them, how Sarah's actions affected them for the judge's review in consideration in regards to sentencing. Sarah seems a little more serious now after consultation with her attorney. There is no jury here, so she would be more casual and not worried about representing herself for the jury in any way. But it is important how she represents herself for the judge. He takes everything into consideration. It's not a done deal just based on the sentencing investigation that was done and the reports that are submitted. He will go over all of that, and he will go over the trial, and he will go over all the evidence, everything that was submitted, and there will be pleadings from both sides as to aggravating factors or mitigating factors or should be taken into consideration in sentencing. Um, there was a lot for Judge Michael Kraynick to absorb, but in seeing him in action since January on this case, I would say I have no doubt he is dotting every I and crossing every T and looking at every angle of it. He has been one of the most thorough judges I have seen. And I love this stuff. Like, I watch judges like constantly. I read legal briefs daily. Oh, not a lawyer, just a huge law nerd, I guess you could call me. I know. Um, I'm a geek for it, a total geek, unapologetically so. And I'd have to say this trial gave me a lot. As much as I could say I do not understand Mr. Owens' style sometimes and actually think it's a little off-putting, I'd have to say as a defense attorney, he did everything he could for Sarah Boone in the direction she wanted to take this case. Sarah Boone should feel very heard by her attorney, indeed. He saw what she wanted to represent. He believed in her. He believes her side of the story, and he wanted justice for her. And he did his best to represent her. He threw everything at this court he possibly could. I'll give him that. He's not giving up. He would get denied a motion, and he would still be talking about it after. He would still keep bringing it up. He would still try to get it to go his way. He's tenacious, determined. And Sarah Boone did very well with the defense, with an attorney like that by her side. I don't think she could complain about her attorney's performance at all. That doesn't mean she won't. I just think he did the best that he could. And she ended up with more than one attorney. She ended up with three attorneys and two attorney assistants, plus the private investigator. They even had a jury consultant. Uh, she did better than I'm sure even she had anticipated as far as building a defense team. And it was her poster that did it. It was her help wanted ad that she submitted to the court for posting. Mr. Owens said that he saw that and he thought that she deserved to have an attorney. I'd also like to say that Mr. Cacciatore did a bang up job. Those closing arguments, focusing on the elements of the crime in the suitcase and what it actually meant, uh, were quite impressive. Quite impressive. Their ability to hold back until they knew what evidence was going to come in regards to George Torres's past, which allowed for Sarah Boone's own violent past to be put through, her own videos that she recorded of incidences with George to be submitted, and they used them all quite cleverly to their advantage. And it says a lot considering the defense team, if you'll remember, had huge pictures of the injuries that Sarah had received. Quite sympathetically. I mean, a jury could look at that as like, my gosh, look what he did. And yet, in the end, it was Sarah's own videos of certain events that turned them, in my belief. Oh, you know, not a legal opinion, of course, but in my belief, they actually turned at that point when they saw what she was recording, what she was saying during those recordings, how she chose to address the situations. She appeared to be a woman in control of the situation, bent on changing it, more not in the positive way that she keeps presenting herself, but in a very manipulative, demeaning, dehumanizing way. I think that is the picture she portrayed that way. And it was hard for the defense to overcome. I would think that the hardest thing for the defense to overcome was how Sarah portrayed the situation herself. It was Sarah herself, her words, her demeanor, her attitude in regards to the whole thing that was difficult to overcome. Mm. We are 18 minutes in. Sorry that you have to hear me rambling on, but I want the full record here for prosperity for later to have all of the information. I also find it fascinating to watch Sarah prior to these proceedings, like to watch her in the courtroom, what she pays attention to. Oh, she does use this time a lot to converse with her attorney, as she should. They don't get a lot of time together considering she's incarcerated. And they have to make special arrangements to meet. And so this is her time to just make sure she understands everything. And from what we have seen of Sarah Boone in the last 4 years, that's very important to her. She wants every scrap of information. She wants to go over it and get a good understanding. She wants to make sure everyone's doing what they need to do. She needs to be in total control of the situation. And I do believe testimony during the trial of the defense's expert witness actually had alluded to that based on her childhood and based on things in her past, that Sarah has a need to feel in control of all situations. It's how she cope. It's a cope. It's how she's coping with things that have happened in her past or in unstable situations. After Sarah's sentencing, now that she has been convicted, I do believe that the private the marital situation in regards to alimony in custody of her child will be able to go forth now. They had both presented sides to the judge, but their case was stayed, basing the outcome here. It was agreed to by all parties. It would be very difficult for Sarah to represent her case while in jail. However, now that she has been convicted and she will be sentenced today, I do believe there will be more on that. And Brian Boone will be able to petition the court on whether alimony is necessary since she's not contributing or taking care of the child. She doesn't have any housing needs. She doesn't have any of that. I'm sure he can be relieved from some of that. And they will decide whether he owed her anything during the months that she was, the 4 years that she was incarcerated. That'll all be determined by the court, by the family court. It's interesting to note that Sarah did write to that judge also while she was incarcerated about the unfairness of the system, about him not doing his job as well as she would have liked. And amongst other things, Sarah's a letter writer. I'm wondering if she submitted one to Judge Kraynick on her own behalf or the sentencing investigation. I wonder if we'll hear about that later. One of the comments that I got on the back of one of the videos, or actually, it was either the back of a video or a DM, was in regards to the sentencing investigation on what they're allowed to look at. And I do believe they're allowed to look at everything, and that it should be a compilation of everything possible. But it does come from the defense and the prosecution. So if the defense doesn't ask for certain records to be looked at by people that are testifying or submitting reports to the court, they're not going to look at it. This became a problem with their expert witness prior. Um, and we also noticed that with the prosecution, they only had limited things that they wanted people to look at, you know. Um, so I'm not sure, but I do think that if they are asked to look at it, they can. And it was in regards to whether or not her behavior for the last 4 years in those daily documentation of actual her behavioral reports from the prison, whether she got demerits, whether she was cooperative, whether there were any incidences with the guards, rule following. There were several YouTube channels that read them and showed quite a pattern of problem with Sarah where she just likes to go against authority, or especially with the acquiring of extra contraband. Like, remember the story of the 30 slices of cheese that proved to be true in the reports that came through? And then not only was it true once, as far as we all thought was a rumor or just a funny meme, but it was actually true. Well, she did it again after it all the cheese was taken away, and she was told not to actually do that, that she can't be taking cheese off people's trays and storing them in the drawer or anywhere else. Um, yeah, she definitely, definitely did it again. That surprised me. That really surprised me. I does believe that the angle of our view has changed. I do believe perhaps George Kraynick is going to be entering soon. I'm going to be very quiet once the judge starts. Okay, like I think you listened to me enough. 24 minutes in, and you've been listening to me ramble on. Some of you will find it like interesting. Others, I'm sure I'll get comments. But when it comes to this case, there's just so much to talk about and actually go back and look at. 4.5 years of hearings and legal briefs and attorneys coming and going. And there's a playlist below of most of it. Should you want to abide, you want to indulge yourselves, it will be there. It will definitely be there. But I don't think this is the last we're going to hear of Sarah Boone. Uh, we already know of one appeal, in motion, and I can't imagine she's not going to appeal whatever happens here today, unless of course she gets to walk right out, because I do believe that Sarah Boone is the type of individual who, even if she was granted leniency in a reduced sentence, would still appeal that it wasn't enough. Because I really think she wanted everybody to see it from her side. And I think in some way she wanted us to say it was justified what happened to George. But it's not. He was doing her no harm at the time. And she had options. She could have left. She could have just had somebody else let him out if she was in fear. Well, she chose to leave him there to die, even though he reportedly called out to her and told her what was going on. And to me, that's the heart of the whole thing. And I believe it probably was for the jury too. It's very hard, even understanding about the abuse, even understanding that they both were troubled individuals and had a tumultuous relationship. It is very difficult to understand that you could just walk away from a situation like that and go to sleep. Especially somebody you loved. She speaks often of there were good days, it wasn't all bad. So how do you walk away like that? Or if you felt in danger. I know it's easy for us to say we weren't in this situation. But I can't imagine not leaving and just getting somebody else to let him out and help him. Or calling 911. Or the police. Which we saw during trial. She had no problem calling the police to use to her advantage against George whenever she felt it. That the problem needed it. That problem she felt of threatened that night could have been handled by them too. Here we go.
Thank you. Yeah, case.
Calling State of Florida versus Sarah Boone, 2020 CF 2603, State.
Cacciatore on behalf of the state.
Defense.
William J. for the state.
Defense.
James Owens for Sarah Boone.
Ms. Boone is seated at counsel's table. Ma'am, if you could please raise your right hand, Madam Clerk's going to go ahead and swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Ma'am, can you state your full name and date of birth for the record for us?
Sarah Boone, 10-10-7-7.
We are here for a sentencing. The jury returned a verdict on October 25, finding you, Ms. Boone, guilty of murder in the second degree. We are running a little bit late this afternoon. I apologize for that. I was in court all morning and took the opportunity to review all of your submittals from earlier this morning, Mr. Owens, including the victim or the Character statements, the psychological evaluation by Dr. Harper, the motion for downward departure, the motion for new trial, and the state's response to same. Before we proceed with any sentencing in this matter, the court needs to address the defendant's motion for new trial and the state's response to the defendant's motion for new trial. Anything in addition you'd like to argue at this time, Mr. Owens, over and above what is contained in your motion, sir?
No, sir.
State.
No, sir.
All right. After reviewing the motion and the state's response to same, the defendant's motion for a new trial is denied. Based on the court's review of the record, the court's participation in the trial, and the review of all the evidence, and the court's prior findings and rulings at trial and prior thereto. With that, I believe that we're prepared to proceed with sentencing at this time. The court has reviewed the pre-sentencing investigation prepared by the Department of Corrections. Are there any housekeeping matters that we need to address, Mr. J or Mr. Cacciatore, before we proceed?
Not from the state.
Are there any housekeeping matters from your side of the ledger, sir, that we need to address, Mr. Owens?
Judge, I do have 4 lay witnesses that are going to testify. And we've got Dr. Harper here to testify. Of course, my client's going to testify. But one of the 4 lay witnesses wants to appear by Zoom. She lives up in Minnesota. I don't know if that's allowed.
We don't have an objection to that. One of our witnesses will be providing an impact statement, would also like to appear on the court's virtual link as well.
Okay, so stipulated. If you need it, just let Anita know, and I could have her email it to you right now, the link.
We do have the link. She's waiting to get on, I guess.
Who might it be, sir? Several people.
It should be Lana Albert.
She is here, sir. She's in the, she's viewing, her camera's off and she's, microphone is muted, but she's in the lobby.
Okay.
All right, with that, state, you may proceed.
Your Honor, at this time, we would like to take an impact statement from, I believe, Anna Torres, which you will be appearing virtually.
I see several guests, but I do not see a Anna Torres in the virtual lobby, sir.
Well, I think while maybe she's having some issues logging on, we have also in-person witnesses.
We can proceed with those first, sir.
We call Lana Torres.
Please.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Ma'am, good afternoon. Could you state and spell your name for the record for us?
Blanca.
Okay. Ma'am, you can go ahead.
I just want to tell Sarah Boone that I don't hate her for what she did. And I always remember that evening when that lady came into my door and she knocked at the door. And she asked for my name. I said, I tell her my name. And then she said, can I come in? I said, okay, yes. And she told me to sit down. I never think that was gonna be my son. And then she said my son was dead. Since that day, I can't sleep. It's hard for me to remember that moment. My son is not here no more. She don't only kill my son, she killed a father, a brother, an uncle, It's been hard. And my family, because all the brothers, they will always work together. But now it's like something real. Love is missing. Sometimes when I look out the window, I'm waiting for him to come and say, Mom, I love you. She was always there. She come and call me. I miss those mommy. The last time that I talked to him was at 12 o'clock in January, New Year. He came to my bed and said, Mom. He woke me up and I said, Mom, I love you. Happy New Year. And since that day, I don't see him no more. He was my son. I love him. And I miss him a lot. My family miss him a lot too. But I don't hear. But you know what? I was blessed. She ain't gonna be blessed like me because I have my son. I raised him. I have his children, my granddaughter, my grandson, and she don't gonna be able to have that. And I did. I raised him. He wasn't perfect, but he was a good son. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. State anything further from this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Defense?
No, sir.
Thank you. You may call your next victim impact statement.
Victoria Torres.
I do.
Ma'am, could you state and spell your name for the record for us, please?
Victoria Torres. My name is Victoria Torres. George is my brother. Unfortunately, my family has experienced two horrifying tragedies. I just want to make it clear that George deserves justice. As far as my other brother and Sarah deserve to rot in jail. Sarah has caused a lifetime of pain, a lifetime of horrible images, a lifetime of hearing my brother George plead for his life. This is just this moment for all of you. For me and my family, it's forever. Such a simple thing as using a suitcase is so triggering. I try not to close it all the way. I leave at least like 2 or 3 inches for the zipper. And it might sound crazy, but it just helps me. She really has flipped my family's life upside down. And I just hope that we can truly get justice for my brother. And I just want to tell the team, thank you so much for everything they did. And thank you.
Thank you. State anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes.
Thank you.
Your Honor, could we see if Ms. Anna Torres is
Do not see an Anna Torres in the lobby, sir. I have lots of guests, HHSA, Mr. Beck, Lana Albert, Jason Gunn.
Your Honor, is there a cap to the link as to the number of individuals?
Not to my knowledge.
Could we just have just a moment?
Yes. Yes, sir, Mr. Cacciatore.
Your Honor, after speaking with Mr. Owens, given the fact that the victim's daughter is having difficulties with.
Is that her, Anna Victoria Torres?
Yes, sir.
Is that it? Is that who it is? All right, ma'am, good afternoon. Can you hear us?
Good afternoon. I can hear you.
Okay, could you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Ana Victoria Torres, ANAVICTORIA TORRES.
Thank you, ma'am. I understand that you'd like to provide a statement to the court at this time. You may proceed.
Okay. Okay. So I'll be speaking for myself and my two siblings. The murder of our father has impacted us on so many levels and in different ways. I myself, for the first year, would wake up screaming every morning or night, wishing I was having a nightmare, only to wake up to remember all over again that my father is gone and I'll never be able to hear him say he loves me ever again. To know my siblings have been affected in such a way that they are now different. They have had a piece of their heart ripped away from them, all while her son gets to hear his mother's voice and see her alive is pathetic. Because of you, Sarah, my sister is heartbroken. Because of you, Sarah, my brother is left wondering when he will ever see his father again. The loss of my father has left me with chronic depression and anxiety. Seeing any moments of fatherly love or kindness being shown between others in real life or even on TV leaves me in complete shambles. Seeking therapy was a must in order to navigate through my workday without a random breakdown. Thoughts of my father's demise still enter my mind ever so often. I'm left either angry, sad, or sick to my stomach to think of how his final moments were. Jorge Torres, my incredible father. Not only was he my father, but my best friend. My personal comic provided me with wisdom and knowledge, creative and loving dad, an older brother, an uncle, a cousin, a friend, a son, and above all, our father. He was human and deserved to be treated as such. My father, Jorge Torres, was one of a kind, an absolute gem. Unfortunately, his light was dimmed on earth by evilness, but with us, we will forever make his name live on. Especially Sarah, I pray that you see his face when you see him at night. That is it.
Thank you. Anything further, state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything further of this witness?
No, sir.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No other impact statements, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any other witnesses or evidence at this point in time, state?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Owens, you may proceed, sir.
Ms. Diane Smith. Judge, what do you want?
I have no issue with her being at the podium. If you want to move about the well to conduct your examination, that's fine, counselor. Ma'am, come on up. Come on up to this podium right here, ma'am. If you could, raise your right hand. Madam Clerk's going to go ahead and swear you in.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth?
Ma'am, could you state and spell your name for the record for us, please?
Diane Smith, DIANE SMITH.
Okay, thank you very much. Counselor, you may inquire.
And Ms. Smith, tell the court a little bit about you.
I was a chaplain at the 33rd Street Jail for 30 years.
And have you been a chaplain at the jail here in Orange County?
Yes, Orange County Jail
Is that the same
for
jail
30
you're
years.
referring to? Okay. And during that period of time, did you have occasion to meet with Sarah Boone?
I did.
And was it over the course of how long?
I've known her 4 years.
And if you could, tell the court what you'd like to say.
Okay. Well, I first met Sarah. She came in, we have a Christian dorm, and Sarah enrolled in our Christian program. And she was in my classes for a year. And she was very sincere in her efforts to change her life and to be a better person. And I found her very helpful. She was kind and good to people. She loved to serve. And she helped the new girls that would come in, the younger girls. She would mother them and be very kind and very helpful. And then after she graduated from the program, I was her counselor for the other 3 years. And I always found her, very sincere and, trying to do better. I spoke with many inmates that knew her and was associated with her. And they spoke very highly of her and said that, she was helpful and kind and tried to help other people. And I just found her to be, very sincere and trying to be a very good person and change and help people.
Was the Bible involved at all?
Oh, yes, it was all spiritual. That's our, yes, it was spiritual growth plus character, growth in character, trying to just be a better person in general. She liked to serve other people, like she would help the girls wash their clothes and show them around and teach. But spiritually, she grew very, very great and spiritually.
Thank you.
Hang on, ma'am, just 1 second.
Ma'am?
Hang on just 1 second, Ms. Smith. State, any questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you.
I'd like to call Cristina Pena.
Yeah, it's fine, Counselor. Thank you. Ma'am, come on up if you can. Raise your right hand. Madam Clerk's going to go ahead and swear you in.
Do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Ma'am, if you could state and spell your name for the record for us.
Cristina Pena, Cristina Pena.
All right, you may inquire, sir.
How old are you?
31,
And where do you live?
Orlando.
Now, it's my understanding, Ms. Pena, that you were in the county jail with Sarah Boone.
Yes,
How long were y'all in the same cell together?
yes. I was in there for 4 years, but we're together for 3.
And I understand ultimately the charges against you were dismissed. And so you were released on what day?
April 4th this year.
2024?
2023.
2023. So you've been out for a pretty long.
I've been out for like 6 or so months now. Yeah, since April
Okay,
of this year, actually. Sorry.
April of 2024. And you said y'all were bunkmates there together for about 3 years.
Yeah.
I would assume that y'all got to know each other pretty well.
We did.
And if you'd like to speak on her behalf to the judge.
Sarah's one of my best friends, my only.
Take your time.
She's helped me a lot. Spiritually and like growing, and she helps everybody. She's always, I don't know, spirit. She helped me a lot, and she would come to me. She talked to me all the time and pick me up when I was down, or if I didn't know something. She's good. I don't know. She was a good person to me. Mistakes happen. She always helped. She always helped people. She was always helping everybody in the dorm. She even like her artwork. She did art. If anybody needed any help or needed anything, they'd come to her and she'd help them. And even if they, did wrong to her, she would still go back and help them and praise with them and pray over them and everything. It's just.
And was she a little bit older than you?
Yeah.
How much older was she?
40 in her 40s.
Did you think of her as maybe an aunt or a big sister?
Big sister, yeah. She was like a big sister. It's like a sister I never had. Because I have brothers, so I never, we clicked right away. I don't know. We'd be walking out in the backyard and she just would always try and talk to me, but I'm a quiet person and I don't trust a lot of people. So for me to open up and trust somebody, it's a lot. So.
And obviously y'all were there under difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
She assisted you in getting through that.
Yes, and she helped me a lot with my my case, and I would help her with with hers too. We're both. Justice is not what it is. I don't know how.
Bless you.
We both helped each other out. I don't know.
Ms. Pena, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any questions, State?
No, Your
All
Honor.
right, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you.
Ms. Hill? Judge,
Yes, sir.
after Ms. Hill, I want to take Ms. Albert, please.
Yes, sir. Ma'am, good afternoon. Could you state and spell your name for the record for us?
My name is Mariela Hill, Mariela, last name Hill, Hill.
Thank you. You may proceed, sir.
Ms. Hill, briefly tell us a little bit about yourself.
I met Sarah in jail. I spent 3 months in jail and went through a lot of unfortunate circumstances myself.
All right, now this was in the Orange County Jail here in Orlando?
Orange County Jail.
And when would that have been? Do you recall the dates?
Yes, it was April, from April to June of this year.
Of this year,
2024.
2024.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And did you develop a relationship with Sarah Boone over the course of that 3 months?
Yes, yes. We met when I was moved to the B dorm, and I needed help with a form that I needed to complete, and one of the COs pointed to Sarah to help me out. And since that moment, we became really good friends, and she was so helpful, so kind, so respectful and loving, not just to me, but to everyone. And I have nothing but good things to say about her, her character, her loving heart, and how deep her faith is, her faith in God and believing in justice for everyone. That's what I believe.
State any questions.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Hill. I appreciate it. Ms. Albert, good afternoon, ma'am. Can you hear me? This is Judge Kraynick. And if you can, I would ask you to turn on your camera and unmute yourself at this time, please.
Sir, how do I unmute turn on my camera? I know how to unmute, but I'm not sure how to turn the camera on.
Turn the volume down.
So, ma'am,
Is that better?
When you join the link, there should have been an option for like a pull down on the left-hand side of the screen for you to open out or turn on a camera. I don't know what device you're appearing on, if it's a cell phone or a laptop.
It is an iPhone. Should I try to re-enter the room?
Yeah, try to do that. There should be an option for you to pick a camera. You'll either select the default camera and hopefully we'll be able to see you at that time.
Okay, let me just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Did that work? Can you see me?
I cannot.
Shoot. Yeah, it's saying default camera. It's saying front camera. I chose it. It didn't show my face or anything like that.
My technological skills are limited. State?
I have no objection to the witness making their statement here telephonically.
Okay, appreciate it. All right, Miss Albert, good afternoon. If you could just state and spell your name for the record for us, please.
Certainly. Lana, Lana, Albert, Albert.
Okay. All right, Mr. Owens is going to ask you some questions. And if you could just answer them, ma'am, I would greatly appreciate it. Sir, you can proceed.
Miss Albert, do you have the ability to turn your volume down?
Yes, I just did. I can't hear you very well when I do that, though.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you, but very, very quietly.
How about now?
Yes, I can hear you. Am I okay?
Yeah, you sound a lot better. You were too loud earlier.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
All right, Miss Albert,
tell the court a little bit about yourself briefly.
Well, I live in Minnesota. I currently have end-stage renal disease. Before I became disabled, I was a business owner in the Twin Cities here.
All right. And how old are you?
I am 50 years old.
All right. And you're considered disabled?
Yes, I am.
All right. And have you had an occasion since this event to establish a relationship with Sarah Boone?
Yes, I have. We have been friends for the past a little over 11 months.
And how do y'all communicate?
We've communicated a lot of phone calls, lots of tablet back and forth, and a lot of letters as well. I'd say many hours of time spent with each other.
All right. And do you want to speak on her behalf here today?
I would, please.
All right. Would you please tell the court what you would like for the court to know?
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Your Honor, for the privilege of speaking on behalf of my friend Sarah Boone. I also want to extend my heartfelt condolences to everyone here affected by this terrible tragedy, which has brought us all here and listening in. Many articles and videos and opinions of Sarah have gone out in the airways and on the webs. Opinions that have been formed and commented on so much that it's hard not to give into the temptation to treat people like a comic book or a fictional character. In the case of my friend Sarah, the words narcissist, Karen, villain, many other things, they roll off the tongue with little regard to the humanity that is dismissed so flippantly. And under a lot of circumstances, I was one of those people, as I have a love of true crime. And becoming friends with Sarah has shown me that there's a lot more depth to the people I see on the screen. I'd like to share with the world and with the court about the Sarah Boone that I know. Sarah Boone is a kind, honest, and good person. The Sarah Boone I know is one who loves animals, especially the kind who are damaged and defenseless. How many of us would take in and pour love for a hearing impaired and a sight impaired pair of dogs? She has a natural instinct to help reach out and give of herself, her time and energy and love, especially to those who are hurting or damaged. You all have seen her fight for her own life and truth here. I tell you this, she fights even harder for those she loves, giving time, attention, and companionship without a single thought for her own gain or what somebody can do for her. And one huge example is in the matter of our friendship. As I said before, I have end-stage renal disease caused by a genetic illness called polycystic kidney disease. As my life has progressed, things I've taken for granted have been taken away from me. I could not appear in court in person because I can no longer walk, as my dialysis treatments have affected the circulation of my legs and has confined me to a wheelchair. To say that my life has radically changed is an understatement. Through it all, I have many friends and family I love and cherish. Sarah has distinguished herself differently in this way. In the course of getting to know her, I started sharing the progressing state of my health. It was like lightning had struck her. The moment Sarah had learned the depth of my struggles health-wise, she straight up offered strenuously to donate a kidney to me. I got to tell you this. I hope she's not mad for me showing this, but she had no hesitation, no concern over personal risk or personal gain. I want to convey to this, out and around the world, that is merely offering is a good and heroic act. I've had many friends. I've not had one outside of my brother who has offered me a kidney. That is huge. I don't have anything of equal value to give to her. And that's not the actions of a narcissist. She did it as a reflex action, as a good person. After the verdict came in October, we spoke that night. And I hope Sarah doesn't get mad at me again for disclosing this, but out of all the shock and seriousness of what had happened in the court, the thing that made her emotionally break was that she realized she could no longer be a donor to me. I mean, I was sitting there like, hey, you know, it's going to be okay. But she was so broken up, she couldn't help me. That's a friend. She is not, nor does she come up anywhere remotely close to being a narcissist. Now, one more thing before I go. Social media has worked to rip the blindfold off of Lady Justice, to take the sword out of her right hand and start assassinating Sarah's character. However, the scales are the balance. As it says in Psalm 85, mercy and truth are met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Justice isn't justice without mercy. Our pursuit of righteousness isn't complete and right without peace. Thank you, Your Honor, for the honor of speaking for my friend Sarah Boone. I hope that your justice is mixed with mercy here today. Thank you.
State, any questions?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up, Mr. Owens?
No, Judge.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Albert. I appreciate you.
I'd like to call Dr. Harper.
You want her on the stand or?
I'm okay with her on the stand.
On the stand?
No, she can be right now. Yes, sir.
Be right now. Yes, sir.
I want to see Kevin.
Judge, you want her on the podium?
No, she can be at the podium. That's fine. Doctor, good afternoon. If you could please raise your right hand. Madam Clerk's going to go ahead and swear you in. If you could, doctor, state and spell your name for the record for us, please.
Dr. Julie Harper, JULIEHARPER.
Thank you. Counselor, you may inquire.
And Dr. Harper, we all know we were here a few weeks back for the trial, and your testimony, so the judge knows quite a bit about your testimony. But if you could, I know that you prepared a report, and we have submitted that to the court, which the court has read, and the state has a copy. And I don't know if you want to refer to that or just speak on your own about Sarah Boone and what you did to assess her, and then any opinions that you want to express.
All right. I think that during trial testimony, I reviewed all of the documents, excuse me, and all of the records that were available. They're documented in my report as well. In addition to the forensic clinical interviews that I conducted, I also have had the opportunity to talk to her brother, Philip Paulson, in the interim since the trial, and I included his information in my report as to her family background.
If you could, give the court a synopsis of what your findings are, or what you uncovered maybe from the brother, whatever you think the court needs to hear in this relevant material to his decision.
So referring to the summary section of my report, I'll keep it a brief, but I'll outline the highlights that I feel like haven't been conveyed before, which is an understanding of Ms. Boone's early family life, in that she is the middle child of her parents' union, and that her parents did not have a happy marriage. They didn't provide an opportunity to have a good role model as to how to have a partnership together. Ms. Boone was born in close proximity to her youngest brother, 11 months apart. And in my clinical experience and training, I would say that that disrupted her attachment with her mother, some being close in proximity with her younger brother, whose temperament just seemed to suit a relationship with her mother better than her own. So ultimately, Ms. Boone bonded with her father. Though he wasn't described by either child as an affectionate person, he was somebody that was there for her at sporting events and more of a primary parent for her in that way. His untimely death by heart attack during her high school years was marked by her brother as a turning point for her in how she was acting at home. Her demeanor, her relationship with her mother took a turn for the worse. She was not coping well. She was using substances based on what her brother was saying. And it is my opinion that that early lack of foundational relations with her mom and not feeling very secure, the death of her father, destabilized her. That's a period of your life when you're leaving high school, when you should have formed a very solid foundation to go out in the world. And I don't think that that's what she had at that moment. She bonded easily with Mr. Boone, and you can see that there are elements of that early difficulty with her relationships because she took on a parentified role, in my opinion, during that relationship. And therefore, there's a power imbalance in that she was making decisions and not, again, having an equal relationship. I think that that led her to a sense of being a need to be right, a need to feel like she is the one that's making good decisions, to have some ego support by being in the right all the time with Mr. Boone. And I think that that led to some behaviors that she carried over into her relationship with Mr. Torres, in that she's parentified around him and acting more like a parent-child relationship, being a facilitator of housing and applications for jobs and things like that. So again, there's a power imbalance that I think was very seriously misaligned, as her brother and the property manager of their apartment had verified. They saw her being abused, physically abused in serious ways, or the effects of the abuse in bruising or calls to them. It is my opinion that she called for help, but when people got tired of her not leaving Mr. Torres, they stopped responding to those calls. And basically, Ms. Boone handled things on her own. And as other people with healthier boundaries probably would have left, she being acting out the pattern of intimate partner violence did not leave. She stayed long past when it would have been smart for others, or others would have said to leave, sorry. The undergirding of that not leaving the relationship is a long-term anxiety problem that became post-traumatic stress disorder. There is an earlier instance of exposure to traumatic stress in that she was the person in the hospital after her father died who found him having students perform CPR on his dead body. So that was an early exposure to high traumatic stress, witnessing that incident. And based on her brother's description, that was something that changed her. When a person is exposed to numerous compounding stressors, their adrenaline system is changed. It alters your body. And things that might be an otherwise neutral situation, you tend to have a cascading adrenaline response to that. And I think that that ultimately for her, as she succumbed to other instances of serious physical abuse from her partner, became post-traumatic stress disorder. I do think that that is a condition that is still existent even while she's in jail. It's something that she needs treatment for because those triggers are unmitigated, meaning that she hasn't really had the kind of therapy to address them and reduce her adrenaline and anxiety responses when she thinks of past instances of traumatic events that have happened to her. You can also respond to post-traumatic stress disorder clinically by using antidepressant therapy, and that would be something that could assist her ultimately in reducing symptoms if she had counseling and antidepressant therapy.
Now, Dr. Harper, I know you testified in trial that, in your opinion, she suffered as a adult spouse, the syndrome that is legally recognized in Florida, in the courts of Florida.
That's correct.
And I understand that that is tied to this intimate partner violence, which is maybe the same thing, but there's a complex mental health issue that ties into that. Can you speak on the complexity of that whole cycle that one such as Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres were involved in?
Certainly. So intimate partner violence is not a diagnosis. It's a pattern of events that occur between two partners in which the power dynamic is altered by the physical abuse or behaviors that are controlling in nature to the point that someone's safety is threatened. It's common for victims of that to have a complex mental health condition, often including depression, anxiety, and substance abuse problems. And what might be substance abuse to cope with the problem, like numbing oneself, will sometimes result in its own diagnosis. The pattern of intimate partner violence, I think we covered in the trial, but just in summary about that, there are phases in which at first bonding of the two partners might be something positive. They've got something in common or have pleasurable time together. And then the secondary phase of that is when there is change in dynamic and some kind of traumatic event occurs, some instance of physical violence. And then there's a third phase in which it's like a honeymoon phase where they're trying to right the relationship. So in phase one, when they're having something pleasurable, the tone shifts. Phase two, there is some kind of incident. And phase three, there's a honeymoon phase. As that pertains to anxiety, I think that a person who suffers from intimate partner violence never stops experiencing that hypervigilance, waiting for the next instance of violence to occur. So even though they may look happy, they might be experiencing something positive, they've not really relaxed because their memory that could or will occur again is still in their mind. So they haven't fully stopped experiencing intimate partner violence. It's just what phase of the process they're in.
Now, and Dr. Harper, it goes into more detail in your report, which I supplied to the court, which is a total of 11 pages, and I believe that's confidential documents.
That's what's been marked. I don't believe it's been filed in the court file.
Okay.
If it has, that's something if it needs to be, it's something we can address. I have reviewed it. It does reflect confidential and privileged information on the first page. I don't believe it's been filed in the court file unless you did it. Okay. It already has been? All right, appreciate it. Okay, excellent. Thank you, sir.
And Dr. Harper, you're aware that the defense has filed a defendant's motion for downward departure.
Yes.
And we've listed several factors under paragraph 3, the capacity of the defendant to appreciate the criminal nature of her actions and conform with the requirements of law or substantially impaired, that she requires specialized treatment for a mental disorder that is not related to substance use or addiction, although you agree that she does suffer from alcohol use disorder.
So she has an underlying mental health disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I additionally diagnosed her with alcohol use disorder, which is separate.
But you agree she does require specialized treatment for a mental disorder that's not related to the substance use or addiction?
That's correct.
And you agree she's amenable for treatment?
Yes.
And you would agree that she acted under extreme duress in this unique homicide case?
Yes.
And you would agree that the uniqueness of the circumstances, the facts and circumstances surrounding the case, that the offense was committed in an unsophisticated manner?
Yes.
It was isolated.
That's my understanding as well.
Other than she had the charge, which both of them were charged at one time, and I think she had the strangulation allegation, the felony case that was ultimately dismissed when both of them were arrested.
She had a prior felony case. Facts are different, of course, than this particular case we're here today.
Dr. Harper, I believe that's all the questions I've got, unless you would like to say if I've missed anything, of course.
No,
Okay, and if not, it's in the report.
yes.
Any questions?
Yes, may she take the stand so I can take the podium?
Yes, that's fine. You may inquire, sir.
In pages 1 and 2 of your report, you go through the sources of your information, correct?
Yes.
And that would include 8 interviews that you had with her from the course of August of 2020 through September of 2024, correct?
There were 9 interviews, but 8 dates of service are listed.
You did the Miller Forensic Assessment of Symptoms Test, or MFAST.
That's right.
Inventory of Legal Knowledge, ILK.
That's right.
Clinician Administered PTSD Scale 5 examination.
Yes.
You consulted with her attorney.
Yes.
Videotaped interviews from this court case number of Sarah Boone, interview part 1 and 2, Abraham Moreno interview, Brandon Moats interview, Brian Boone interview, Juan Torres interview, and Melissa Sexton interview, correct?
Yes.
You reviewed the autopsy photos.
Yes.
You reviewed some of the digital forensic exhibits, including the Apple iPhone XS and a Samsung SMJ 327 T1 photographs from those two devices.
Yes.
You reviewed Bates stamped discovery pages 1 through 413.
That's correct.
The crime scene photos are photos of a scene taken on June 19th of 2020.
Yes.
Aspire Health records.
Yes.
And who do those pertain to?
Aspire Health records are for Sarah Boone.
Florida Hospital Medical Group records.
Yes.
And who do those records pertain to?
That is also for Sarah Boone.
And Aspire, is that a mental health treatment facility?
It has an emergency department record, but that would be the place where she was detained under the Baker Act.
And it is routine and common in the practice of forensic psychology or psychiatry to rely on the records of other such practitioners.
As a source of information, sure.
You reviewed the deposition of Dr. Tanya Warner.
I did.
You reviewed the trial testimony of Sarah Boone, Brian Boone, Dr. Michael Brannon, Dr. Tanya Werner, correct?
Yes.
The jury verdict form dated 10/25/24.
Yes.
Witness list notice of filing amended.
Yes.
On this case. Records of Jorge Torres or George Torres involving case numbers 2019 MM 5114, a 911 call and PDF, case 2019 MM 7193, case 2019 MM 7193, Torres Public Records, case 2019 MM 7193, Torres Photos, Central Florida Primary Care Records, Advent Health Orlando Medical Records, correct?
Yes.
And those latter records that I just mentioned, those for Mr. Torres and not Ms. Boone, correct?
That's right.
Then you reviewed Sarah Boone written correspondence, Sarah's listing of domestic violence incidents, Sarah's writings regarding missing days of work and Baker Act, and a 74-page life story.
That's right.
And then case 2018 CF 10573, public records and photos.
Yes.
And a telephone interview with Melissa Sexton, the property manager, which you conducted on October 1st, 2024.
Yes.
And a telephonic interview with Philip Paulson, the defendant's brother, on November 26, 2024.
Yes.
Where has Ms. Boone been housed and living since February of 2020?
At the Orange County Jail.
And does the Orange County Jail provide mental health services to inmates?
It does.
And you already testified you would routinely, as a forensic psychologist, review records kept of a psychological or psychiatric treatment of a patient or a client, correct?
Yes.
In this particular case, have you reviewed any mental health records generated by the Orange County Jail for Ms. Boone?
No, I have not had the opportunity to do that.
So for the last 58 months or so, if she was being seen by the mental health treatment staff at the jail, you have not reviewed those records.
That's correct.
And they are overseen at the jail, in the Orange County Jail, by a psychiatrist. Are you aware or not?
If the person's level of mental health intervention deems them eligible for psychiatry, then they will.
And any diagnosis or lack of diagnosis that they have had during the course of the last 58 months, you are unaware of because you did not review the records.
That's right.
I don't have any other questions.
Any redirect examination?
No, Judge.
All right, thank you.
One question. Dr. Harper, I didn't ask you to review those records, did I?
No.
Thank you.
Judge, I believe you said it at the very beginning that I had submitted several letters on behalf of Ms. Boone, and she didn't hear that, but I wanted her to be made aware.
Yes, ma'am.
And that you don't actually read those letters into the record, but you did read them.
I have reviewed them. They're in my binder here. How many do I have? Yes. Give me a second. I can tell you. I have I have 6 handwritten letters. First one is 1 page. Second one is 2 pages. Third one is 1 page. Fourth one is 2 pages. Fifth one is 2 pages. Sixth one is 2 pages. I have a typed letter from Diane Smith, the assistant chaplain. I have another typed letter from a Nicole Ray, a typed letter from a Stephanie L., a typed letter from Philip Paulson, a email from Lana Albert, 2 pages in length, and a 2-page email from a Danielle Parsons.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Judge, I would like to call Sarah Boone.
You may proceed.
If you could take this.
Yes, please. Ms. Boone, you can be seated. You've been previously sworn. You may inquire, sir.
For the record, just state your name again.
Sarah Boone.
All right. Now, this is unlike a trial, so you're allowed to speak in a narrative form, as well as I understand you have taken some notes or written a letter that you want to read from, and then you want to speak to the court after that.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and get started?
This is actually an edited version of. I had a lot to say. I've had a lot of time to think about things, and I didn't really know how to put it on paper. And I didn't know how much I could say or how little I should say. So what I have here is, like I said, an edited version. But I would like to read the more important parts that I feel that everyone should know that wasn't said in my actual trial. And on top of what I have on paper, I have, this is just the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. So I wanted to read this, and then if I may, I would like to address everyone in my apology on top of my statement.
You may proceed, ma'am.
Kintu Sukuroi is a kind of Japanese ceramic style which means to repair with gold. In this tradition, when a ceramic piece breaks, an artisan will fuse the pieces back together again using liquid gold or gold dust lacquer. So rather than being covered up, the breaks become more obvious and a brilliant new piece of art emerges from the brokenness. It embraces flaws, weakness, and imperfections, and also teaches the essence of resilience. Every crack in a ceramic piece is a part of its history, and each piece becomes more beautiful because it has been broken. This is the wisdom of Kintu Sukuroi. In my wisdom and with all of my repairs, then, now, and ongoing, God is, has been, and will always be my artisan. All of my gold is forgiveness. This has held me together, made me shine brighter, and overcome the damage caused by Jorge Torres, the Torres family, the justice system, Orange County Corrections Department, social media, scoundrel detectives, infamy, defamation, ongoing constitutional rights violations, second-degree murder, forced into being pro se. Just as gold is very precious, forgiveness is invaluable. Forgiveness is not an attempt to change or forget who, what, or how you've lived through to be so gold, but an act of grace, humility, and considerable self-compassion to be set free from sorrow. Withholding forgiveness denies your brilliance and adds even greater grief and deeper heartache, irreparable cracks on top of the already that no one deserves, no matter the pain or disappointment, untruths or injustice. It doesn't matter. As the more broken you are, even though now different than before, you've become more outstanding and more extraordinary. Above all, when you let go of blame, misunderstandings, excuses, give up your anger and cease from resentment, this is forgiven. And when you forgive, you have, and when you forgive, you heal. And when you heal, you move forward. My goal begins with Jorge Torres, and every time he slapped me, kicked, punched, spit on, raped, stabbed, choked, laughed at, pushed, pulled, dragged, whipped, tripped, stole from, lied, terrorized, threatened, humiliated, forced, degraded, made me cry. Every time he tried to end me, defeat, or destroy. I forgive George for beating me senseless, for trying to sleep because I had to go to work or my son's field trip the next day, for ruining my deceased family's heirlooms, traditions, and keepsakes, my son's furniture, destroying the television we watched together, for wrecking our townhome by breaking windows, punching holes in the walls and doors, ramming his entire body into glass doors, kicking in my front and back door over and over and over, for breaking or removing the locks from all of the doors and sometimes the knobs altogether, so I had nowhere to feel safe, including the sacred space of my son's room where he beat me bloody on his bed. For terrorizing and threatening my blind and deaf dogs by leaving the gate open I built to keep them safe, telling me he hoped I'd find their bloated dead body in the pond or scrape their remains off of the pavement, for kicking them off of the bed and throwing across the room because they were trying to protect me, for threatening to make me unrecognizable to my son by breaking all of the bones in my face, like his brother Moses did to him after he kept seeing all of the bruises from George beating me, like all of the times their father beat their mother, for all of the drunken rages and fist fights with so many neighbors when wandering into their apartments during hunting expeditions after I had escaped, for drowning me in liquor and wine because I didn't want to drink, causing me to urinate on myself, then butting the end of the bottle in my face, giving me 2 black eyes and a bloody nose, for making me experience what it is to be sodomized, threatening to kill my friends and the neighbors when they checked on me to make sure I was alive and in one piece, for threatening to burn down our townhome and set my car on fire because I got a job, for holding me hostage on weekends my son was supposed to come over by keeping my keys around his neck, my phone in his crotch, and a butcher knife stuck in the middle of the table as a warning not to ask anything or try to leave, for stabbing me in the leg and not letting me call 911 for an ambulance or seek help, where I nearly bled to death until I concocted a lie to save him from being arrested, for destroying my phone with a hammer because my son called, for me experiencing ever being arrested and after today, prison, for beating me almost blind, crushing my occipital lobe, for having me experience what it means to see stars like in the cartoons where a character has a tall lump on their head. I had that too, and many times, for dragging me downstairs by my hair in the middle of the night just to sit next to him, for taking my car driving drunk with my debit card to buy more alcohol while I slept, even after I kindly explained the importance of my car to take my son to school foremost, me to work, and he to his batterers intervention classes and probation officer meetings, where I would be forced to sit for hours in the parking lot waiting for him, for causing me so much trauma and pain mentally, physically, emotionally, I had to be hospitalized more than once, for destroying my reputation and integrity, for my M for murderer scarlet letter, not letting me feel safe to live, talk to other people, spend time with my son, have a job, friendships, simply go to the bathroom with the door closed, or go to sleep soundly or comfortably. I forgive George for lying, for him trying in so many ways, so many times, to end me with his terrifying love. I also forgive the Torres family, his mother and father foremost, also his 2 ex-wives and daughters, all for knowing who George was capable of and has done in the past, his history of violence and where he learned it, then to keep turning a blind eye when I would ask for help. All of his siblings, including Farrell Torres, who is now on his way to prison for stabbing the mother of their baby in the side of her head. For everyone who knew what George was doing to me, sometimes how and when, but allowed and enabled. I forgive them for caring too late. I hope they all ask themselves while quiet and comfortable in bed at night the uneasy question, what could I have done to stop this from happening to both of them? And after all the time Sarah tried to, by asking for help from all of us and so many times. Another great contributor of my gold is social media, with its greed, insensitivity, deception, obvious exploitation, and advantageous gain from my criminal case as a whole, and for sentencing me by anticipation as a result of ignorance and hate, conjured and fabricated by the organized crime that is social media, which condemned me in the court of global public opinion since the beginning. My family law case is the new prey waiting to be picked apart and pillaged from me being made infamous by social media in my criminal case. It simply seems I cannot forgive and be forgiven and move forward. Social media has made me a pariah. It has caused great oppression and undeniable disadvantages, especially by broadcasting and manipulating my cases online. In my criminal case, as a result, my opportunities to be given a fair, proper, and uninfluenced, successful conclusion was heavily depleted and poisoned. I forgive them. Also, all of the media tycoons for not having a life of their own, trying so desperately to make themselves seem so right by making me appear so wrong. Forgiveness for prejudgment, ridiculous theatrics, lies, making and taking blood money from my and others' misfortunes, accidents, and catastrophes. It's all over their hands and their keyboards. And even after all that's been said and done, theorized, hypothesized, scrutinized, and blasphemed, in my case, still no one knows me. In the end, I forgive myself for not choosing my life sooner, for not being more brave, vigilant, bolder, and outspoken, stronger, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, for being hopeless, desperate, simple-minded, weak, and inexperienced. I forgive myself for not realizing I was enduring a life of domestic violence and that the vicious cycle of never ends. I had nothing to compare to. I've never been hit by a man ever before in my life. I was raised hitting a woman was wrong and should never happen. No excuse. I forgive myself for not escaping permanently, for not fighting back sooner to save myself, my son, my dogs, home, and car. Having 20/20 hindsight, thinking of everything I could have done differently or better to avoid the outcome. I think about this every day since. Also, of all the good days we had together, for him at least, while I was constantly in hyperdrive, high alert, and paranoid, making sure I did everything right all the time. If not, the great possibility I would be ended as George threatened me with so many times before. I forgive myself for falling in love with a monster, and no matter how grotesque he may become, I still loved him, hoped, and forgave. I tried breaking the spell so he wouldn't be a monster anymore. I saw who he was inside. George made me then, now, and always love him for all of his cracks also. We made each other our own brilliant pieces of art from the cracks and repairs. Unfortunately, not all cracks can be. In all of my forgiveness, George is my greatest lesson and will forever be a part of me. I think of him every day and still speak to him when alone on the rec yard. I ask his forgiveness and that he looks for me at the gates of heaven so I can tell him how sorry I am, endlessly, and that I never stopped loving him. In all of it and still. When I first came to jail, I put my mat under my bed and cried all day and all night for months, only falling asleep from being so exhausted with grief. I wrote him letters. I wrote his family and his daughters, apologizing for asking for their forgiveness. But due to fear that my life or sons would be jeopardized, I did not send. I am sorry. I cannot begin to fathom any of their grief and sadness. Please forgive me. Almost everything reminds me of him, seeing my stab wound especially every day especially. It truly reminds me that all I really did live through. George haunts me. He is everywhere. I believe because I do still love him, think of him, and miss his laugh the most. In my heart, I know he is with me and understands that this tragedy was not intentional. I hope everyone can, his family foremost. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please wholeheartedly know that, and always, I would never. Forgive me, George. Forgive me, Torres family. Forgive me, Judge Kraynick. To the entire planet, please forgive me. I graciously and humbly ask for consideration, for forgiveness to be extended instead of judgment, for reconciliation and restoration for all of us to move forward. My apology is profuse and ceaseless. Allow me please to brush off the muck, wipe the blood off of my face, and fix the cuts in my skin. I ask for understanding in what really happened and for how long, for second chances, repentance, and redemption to advocate for all domestic violence survivors, to help them overcome, heal, and still hope, always, to make their voices heard, to confidently walk with all of their scars on the outside and the inside, to help them not ever become a casualty of domestic violence as so many others, to stop the abuse and maltreatment before it's too late. There is always hope, and you can survive. In my soft-spoken conclusion, I ask this: would I be the darling mother, celebrated woman of the year, if it were I who died? How many daughters, mothers, sisters, aunts, grandmothers, nieces, and friends have been because they did? I am a survivor. Learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke oppressors, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. Isaiah 1:17, all-encompassing, protect the abused.
Ms. Boone, is that the end of your written statement?
Yes.
Now, gathering your thoughts, did you want to make an oral statement?
I do.
All right, would you do that now?
Yes, please. My statement, my verbal statement, is primarily to the Torres family, to the judge, to his daughters. I know you all know who I really am, and that I did care for George, and that I do still love George. I know you know that we had very many good days, and I take offense to the statement of being said that this is just for a moment. Right now with me here in the courtroom in front of you all, this is just for a moment. But the moments before that, in order for me to be here, is endless. It's everlasting. The scars that I have on the inside, my outside scars have healed except for my stab wound. But this has changed me as a person to see things differently and to understand things differently and to not be weak and just try to protect yourself, and forever, regardless of the time that I may receive from today, I forever will have this experience. I forever will have Jorge Torres with me in my heart, in my mind, my body, and my soul. As he and I used to say that we were one soul split into two bodies. This is not just for a moment. It may be for everyone in this courtroom, but when I leave, this is forever. When you all leave, that this is forever. This is forever for everyone here and those who it matters to most. I am one of those who will experience this forever. I'm sorry. Words do not define my shame, and I don't know what else it is that I can say and convey to the Torres family how this happened. The ifs and whys and how really don't matter. It happened, and I'm sorry. Words cannot describe. And I hope that everyone can forgive me, the Torres family most of all, and his daughters, because I know what he meant to them. And I don't think that anybody ever understood what he meant to me and I to him. And I ask for forgiveness.
Ms. Boone, I have just one or two questions, if you don't mind. And you can speak on it if you want or not. But this is a unique case, and one of the reasons it's so unique is that you were in jail for 4.5 years prior to your trial. And I understand that when you were brought up as a child, that you did have some spirituality in your family, some church, some religion.
Always.
But I understand that you got away from that. Did you have a chance during the 4.5 years to look back at your spirituality?
Absolutely. You know, Everyone supposes that this is one of the worst experiences of my life, and it's actually been one of my greatest. If I were not beaten to death, I was going to work myself to death on the outside, and I never had time to get back into my Bible and to pray and to be with the Lord. And I, being here incarcerated, have had time, of course, to get closer to God, to reacquaint myself to Him and realize what it's all about. This is all temporary. And when I say temporary, I don't mean by being set free in jail or from prison or wherever else. It means being set free and temporary, meaning that you work for something higher, you work for God, that you strive for your crown to be placed upon your head by Jesus Christ by being said, "You have done well, my good and faithful servant." I've always tried to be a good and faithful servant. I was just a servant as opposed to doing all that I can when my family were alive and I was going through everything up to this point. I've become so much more closer to the Lord, and it's made me such a better person. And I hope that I am an example going forward of the Lord's light and can draw many people to me because of it.
Any follow-up, State?
No, I assumed that was the final word.
Thank you. She can return back to council's table. Anything else from your side of the ledger, Mr. Owens?
No more witnesses, Judge, just arguments.
Okay. Anything else in rebuttal or just proceed to argument, State?
Just proceed, argument.
Okay. All right. Once Ms. Booth's seated, you can proceed with your argument, either Mr. J or Mr. Cacciatore. You may proceed, sir.
Your Honor, I'm going to start my argument by what I anticipate Mr. Owens will bring up in his presentation regarding the plea offer in this case. That she was offered the resolution in this case of 15 years in the Department of Corrections to begin with. I think it's important, though, that the entire circumstance of that plea offer is put forward. And there's something very critical to that. It's not just 15 years in the Department of Corrections. It's 15 years in the Department of Corrections, but it's predicated on something. And the consideration that it's predicated on is the defendant coming to court and accepting responsibility for her actions. For her coming to court and saying, "I am responsible for George Torres's death, and I accept the punishment that comes with it." That consideration was never given in this case. And because that consideration was never given in this case, the offer of 15 years in no way represents what this case is worth, or what George Torres's life is worth. That is an offer predicated on a particular circumstance, a circumstance of a first-time defendant accepting responsibility and giving every benefit of the doubt and coming to court and saying that they are ready to be punished. Those conditions were never met. So then we turn to this case, and we turn to this crime, and we turn to the actions of the defendant of taking the law into her own hands and murdering George Torres. She has never shown remorse for that. She didn't show remorse for that here today. She again painted herself as the victim. She's the victim of George Torres. She recounted the litany of evil deeds and mistreatments that he perpetrated upon her. She's the victim of George Torres's family. She's the victim of the police. She's the victim of social media. It's all about Sarah Boone. Everything's about Sarah Boone, about how she is the victim. But Sarah Boone sentenced every one of George Torres's loved ones to a life sentence. Just like she sentenced George Torres when he was in that suitcase. George Torres lived out his last nightmarish circumstance in that suitcase, begging to be let out for several minutes, which undercuts any argument that this was somehow unsophisticated. There was ample time and opportunity over and over for her to do something different, but she went forward with taking the law into her own hands and ensuring that George Torres was never getting out of there, while she went up to bed and went to sleep for hours on end. She can't say that she was in duress for the same reason. She was in such duress of George Torres that she goes upstairs and goes to sleep for 11 hours. Your Honor, there's been nothing from the testimony of Dr. Harper either that establishes any type of diagnosis that would give this court a basis to downward depart. Dr. Harper has put blinders on to the fact that she has been incarcerated for 58 months. 58 months with the opportunity to receive mental health treatment, and the expert witness is absolutely incurious about what any of those records or diagnosis or anything that would have been there would have said. There is no valid basis for a downward departure in this case. She deserves a life sentence. Thank you.
Mr. Owens, response?
Just Kraynick. First off, I want to thank you for taking the time to hear our side, hear the witnesses, and review the letters on Sarah Boone's behalf. You know, we've all been here for this trial. We've all been here for other trials. We've all got some age on us. We've all got some life experience on us. And this is a unique case. This was a unique homicide. It was a unique death. And as we all know, a lot of these cases are not black and white. They're shades of gray. And these crimes don't occur in a vacuum. That there's generally a history, especially involving a domestic couple, a history that comes into play that must be explored. And a lot of what Sarah Boone testified to here today probably happened behind closed doors. And we all know that many times we do not know what happens behind closed doors between a man and a woman in their home, unless there is some reason for the neighbors or law enforcement or somebody else to get involved. And that happened in this case. And so gradually over time, as this event occurred, there was an investigation, and it was learned that there was a history of domestic violence involving these two parties. And what we learned was that physically there was violence, and there were photographs to establish that, as were introduced in the trial. And then there was testimony from experts not only the defense expert, Dr. Harper, that Sarah Boone was the victim, and she was a victim of intimate partner violence, but coupled with the fact that the state's expert testified on the stand at the trial that Sarah Boone was a victim of intimate partner violence, that she suffered from this domestic or this battered spouse syndrome as the hands of Jorge Torres. So there's two sides to it. And in a domestic violence situation like that, 95% of the women get out of that relationship. When violence starts to occur, they've either been raised a certain way, they have a certain self-esteem about themselves where they refuse to put up with it, knowing that it's wrong, knowing that they can do better. But there is a small percentage throughout the country that for whatever reason, mental health issues, addiction issues, whatever it is, it's complex. Financial reasons, children are involved, whatever. If you do any studying on it, there are circumstances where there is a group of women, predominantly women, it can happen to men, but majority of the time it's a woman that gets caught in this cycle of what we term as intimate partner violence. And court heard the testimony about the cycle that occurs. It's over a period of time and it repeats itself, and you go through these phases. And a lot of times the victim's not a great historian at trying to articulate it. She tried to do it here today. And I think on Sarah Boone's behalf, she is a unique individual. She's got the personality that she's got. I don't know, you heard from Dr. Harper that a lot of that was formulated based on the way her mother did not bond with her, the way that her father was the way that he was, the fact that she lost several relatives at a young age, and the trauma that can result. We heard from Dr. Harper that she did suffer from post-traumatic stress as it relates to that trauma in early childhood, and then again as it relates to the events that occurred between Mr. Torres and her. So it's complicated, Judge. It's complicated, but the jury has spoken. Sarah Boone was entitled under Florida law to present that defense, and she did. That testimony was allowed to be presented. She was allowed to testify. But the jury spoke. And so here we are today with you in a position to decide what is justice for Sarah Boone. And I don't know you that much other than our time together, but from what I know you try to do the right thing. And that's what we're asking the court to do. To have some discernment, to have some understanding of the unique situation that Sarah Boone found herself in. And quite frankly, Judge, this all didn't occur behind closed doors. A lot of this was in the public eye. Mr. Torres had, I believe, 3 criminal cases before the courts of this county in which Sarah Boone was a victim. Mr. Torres was the accused. Those cases were dismissed. We know from the history of this domestic violence field that that's normal, that Sarah Boone every time either tried to bond him out or tried to get the case dismissed. At some point, somebody has to stop. Somebody has to say, wait, what's going on here? This keeps repeating. It's going to get worse. Something's going to happen. the system failed, Sarah Boone. I'd ask for you to consider that. Circumstances surrounding that failure and what led us here today. I've asked the court to consider a downward departure. I believe you've gotten a copy of the score sheet.
Not since before trial.
Okay.
Is the score sheet stipulated to?
Yes, yes, sir.
All right, you may approach. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Judge, I was provided that here today, and I believe, I can't remember the total number of months that it involves, but divided by 12, I think it's 20 months. 20.6 is the low end of the guidelines or something about.
It's 246.0 months based on the score sheet.
I did the calculation, but I believe that the low end is 20 years. I'm sorry, 20 years, 20.6 years state prison, I believe is the low end.
20.5. Yes, sir.
As the court knows, I believe it's on page 3. There are some aggravators that the court can consider in opposing the sentence, and then there are a list of mitigators that the court can consider in downward departing, meaning going lesser than the low end of the guidelines. And in the defendant's motion for downward departure, we mentioned, and I had Dr. Harper testify about 2 or 3 of the grounds, and the court needs to only find one to go below the guidelines. The capacity of the defendant to appreciate the criminal nature of her actions and to conform said actions to the requirements of the law were substantially impaired. Judge, I don't have to reiterate the facts and circumstances surrounding this event. You were here, you heard the testimony, you heard the circumstances surrounding what happened and how it happened. I would ask that you consider that as a mitigator. To D, the defendant requires specialized treatment for a mental disorder that is not related to substance abuse or addiction and is amenable to treatment. I think it's fair to say here that we know that Sarah suffers from some mental health issues, objective mental health issues that have been opined by Dr. Harper and Dr. Werner. And you heard Dr. Harper testify about the borderline post-traumatic stress disorder that she suffers from as it relates to this event, as it relates to her trauma that occurred in childhood. I think we heard from Dr. Werner. Dr. Werner testified that she suffered from the alcohol abuse disorder, as did Dr. Harper, but Dr. Werner also mentioned that she was not sure about the anxiety disorder, whether it occurred prior to or because she was in the jail for the 4.5 years. However, she does require specialized treatment for the mental disorder, and she is amenable for treatment. And then third, the defendant acted under extreme duress, I think based on Sarah Boone's mindset as she testified to her today, and then you heard from the experts at the trial that when you get that anxious about what happens, Sarah testified about they would have good days where there would be no drinking or very little drinking, and then there would be other days where there was heavy drinking, and generally when Jorge Torres got highly intoxicated is when potentially things could get violent, and that she was constantly anxious about each day that she was with him. She loved him. Obviously, being in a cycle like that where you love someone but can't leave them. For whatever reason, Jorge Torres couldn't leave Sarah Boone, and Sarah Boone couldn't leave Jorge Torres, and it was a vicious cycle. But we believe that she qualifies under that it was under extreme duress at the time of this event. And lastly, the defense was committed in an unsophisticated manner, which was an isolated incident. Now, isolated, we know, Judge, that she had one prior event in which both of them were arrested. You heard her testimony that it was during an event. They ended up downstairs next to the washer and dryer, and that she was on the bottom, and she had used her hands to try to get him off, and she had tried to choke him, and there were some marks on him. And she was arrested for domestic, I think, felony domestic violence battery, as well as he was arrested. I think a few days later, both of those charges were dismissed against either party. But she has no criminal conviction record. She has never been convicted of a crime other than that event. Now, I think that can be distinguished. So we believe that it was an unsophisticated manner. Obviously, the uniqueness of this event is unsophisticated. Anybody that would calculate that they were going to murder somebody by putting them in a suitcase and let them spend the night, and the next morning, not try to dispose of the body, not try to put the suitcase in a car and go dump the body, not try to dispose of the bat, do something. She did nothing. No attempts to tamper with evidence. No attempts after the fact to uncover any conduct whatsoever. No attempts to delete the videos from her phone. Here's my phone, voluntarily giving that information. I think that goes to the unsophisticated manner and unintentional death that occurred. I remember the first time I saw the suitcase video. And I know people have differing opinions. Tony Henderson, my colleague, had a different opinion when he saw it. But I remember the first time I saw the video and I heard what she was saying to him. When he was saying, "Hey, Sarah, let me out. I can't breathe," or words to that effect. And the way that she was talking to him and the statements that she gave him, in my mind, what has he done to her? What has he done to her? Any loved one you see in a situation like that is going to run and let them out. So my thought was, obviously, they were both drinking. But what has he done to her? And I think it's telling about what she'd endured. So it's not a clear-cut case, Judge. It's not black and white. There is some gray. And it's up to you to decide what's appropriate based on the court's, based on the jury's decision. But I would ask you to temper whatever justice that you think is appropriate with some mercy, and consider the fact that the state was willing to offer 15 years on a manslaughter as a lesser included offense based on the facts and circumstances that they were aware of prior to this trial. Thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttal by the state? Court has had the opportunity to review the evidence and testimony that was presented at trial. The victim impact statements presented here today, the statements of character witnesses, both orally and in writing, Dr. Harper's report and testimony, the defendant's testimony, pre-sentencing investigation, the arguments of the state and the arguments of the defense. Court pronounces sentence as follows. Ms. Boone, court sentences you to life in the Department of Corrections with credit time served that Madam Clerk will provide to you momentarily. There are also court costs and costs of prosecution, which Madam Clerk will give you the totals of momentarily. Due to the court levying a life sentence, the court is inclined to liquidate those to a civil judgment unless I hear opposition from the state.
No opposition, Your Honor.
All right. Madam Clerk, if you could please give us the credit time served and the court costs, please.
4 years, 9 months, and 8 days, and the court costs are $418, a state prosecution fee of $100, a jerk fee of $50, and a fee of,
I'm right.
so the total would be, come to $618.
All right, ma'am, the court costs and costs of prosecution are $618. Those will be liquidated to a civil judgment. You will be given credit time served of 4 years, 9 months, and 8 days. You will have 30 days from today to appeal the judgment and sentence in writing. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided to you. I'm going to have the courtroom deputy provide you the paperwork. Because you've been incarcerated for the last 58 some odd months, the court is going to declare that you are indigent in this matter. I cannot appoint the public defender to represent you as they are conflicted out. Similarly, I cannot appoint the regional conflict counsel to represent you for the same reasons. The clerk will appoint an attorney from the conflict wheel who specializes in appellate litigation. And again, you'll have 30 days from today to appeal that judgment and sentence in writing. Do you have any questions for me? You will now be remanded into the custody of the Orange County Jail to transfer you to the Department of Corrections, and I wish you the best of luck. State, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Defense, anything further? All right. Thank you all very much. Court's off the record.
We are off the record. What I'm sure that you do want to see Sarah escorted off, so we are not going to end the stream until she is out of the courtroom. So we have a life sentence. They will apply time served towards when she can appeal for parole if it is available in the state of Florida. I'll do a little research on that. I do believe it's normally around 25 years in other states, in other cases that I've seen, but I have to check Florida specifically on this. Court costs, of course, she's indigent, so there's really no way they're going to get the $618. So there's a civil judgment on that. And she will get an appeal attorney based on the regional appeal conflict attorney sections, the ones specially designed for situations like this. Because the prosecution, because of the motions and the prosecution attorney, the public defender's office that represented her is conflicted out, the regional defendant attorneys for appeal are out based on the appeals for a new trial, which was denied. We will see whether or not she is going to appeal that. Whether James Owens will still be on board to go to the appellate court for that. It's not up to the appellate court yet. The motion has been denied by Judge Kraynick prior to sentencing, and now it can go to appellate. And Sarah still had a smile for those sitting behind her.
She's on her way.
Okay. Can you just give me a heads up when they get her here?
Yeah, I got you.
I gotta go down and see her real quick.
All right.
I don't believe she goes back to the Orange County Jail. I do believe she goes into holding until they send her to wherever the incoming is from court for the court. She can go to a prison temporarily till they get a permanent assignment for her based on the type of case and the type of prisoner that she is. That's how it is in other states, and we'll see. It's not going to be for a day or two till we find out where she's going to go. And it could be a transfer after that fact, like there are in several other cases that we covered.
Just hold on. All you gotta do is sign. I'll help you.
Mhm. They are requesting that she sign, and I'm not sure what it is.
There's a special contingency form for the appeal. She's got this on. This is the one for the court. To begin with.
This is the law enforcement officer with the prison that has been with her for almost every hearing and every day of trial. custodially watching and transferring her back and forth. She's had the same look on her face. She's not amused. She's not amused. There were days that I so felt like she was all of us.
Is this the one for, Madam Clerk, is this the one for the appeal?
Yeah.
Okay. She's signing it now, are you?
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, we'll file it, and then we already ordered to appoint another attorney.
Okay.
I can give you the.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the order probation. Yes, I do.
I mean, if her trial continues to go, then she may have that.
I'm often curious after she leaves the hearings, in the trial in particular, and even today after sentencing, what her actual demeanor is like when she gets back to wherever she's going. When she used to go back to the Orange County Jail, back to her bunk with everyone. I wonder if it finally hit her, like the day's proceedings, because she has such an effect, like nothing, like it doesn't matter. Like, it is like, oh well. And this was very serious today. She just got sentenced to life.
That's what they said. That's what he told me. Been telling them since.
And I'm not seeing the effect of that on her. The registering. I know we all react differently to things. It's just very unusual to me.
I'll check when I take care.
And now she's alone. No attorneys. This could be the end of her attorney association. I don't know. Um, Interviews that Mr. Owens has given since the trial ended was that he would not be her attorney going forward for appeal. But he did file the motion for a retrial. But now that it may go to the appellate, I don't know if that means that his motions, he would try to appeal those. I know that he is not going to be the attorney for the appeal of the sentencing. Should she decide to do that within 30 days, and based on previous actions and motions, I would say that she will. If they are going to provide her with an attorney to do it, she will do it. And I could understand with a life sentence over her head, why not? She does seem determined to exhaust every avenue of recourse that she has to her to get her side of the story out there. We have heard her state over and over again that she's the only one that can represent herself, stand up for herself. As we've heard in her statement, it's everyone else's fault, not hers. I think her lack of taking accountability has gotten her exactly where she is right now. Well, that's just my personal opinion. Not a therapist, not a legal authority on anything. I'm just a true crime watcher like the rest of you. This case has fascinated me from the start, and she has been quite an interesting defendant. At times, very hard to understand where she's coming from. I often didn't think she acted in her own best interest, but grown woman, her decisions. There was a lot about this case that absolutely drew me in. And the addition of Judge Kraynick in January just was the icing on the cake. A very balanced, well-informed, very, very, very confident in the law, but also empathetic, compassionate, wanted to see a fair trial, bent over backwards to get her what she needed in the prison to represent herself, understanding the unusual circumstances, even if they were of her own doing. A law and order judge like none I've seen in a while, and it was a joy to watch him in action, actually. Even today, I was not sure what the outcome would be, because he is so well balanced, and I know he takes everything into consideration. The delay of listening to me speak for 30 minutes before it actually started was him actually making sure he went over all of the records, and making sure that there was nothing that could be pointed out that it wasn't covered. He went over everything that was available to him, including things he said were just given to him that day in the morning, to make sure he had it all. I don't see how anyone going before Judge Kraynick could say they didn't get fairness. And I think that she's going. Okay, there we go. Sarah Boone leaving to start her process through the actual prison system, is convicted and sentenced murderer. And that is it. That is it for today. I thank you all for joining me and your patience during the other stream. I will link this one into the previous stream. I'll also put it up separately. I look forward to any comments or questions that you have. But on that, everybody have a good night. And I'm sure we're going to hear it's not the last that we've heard from Miss Sarah Boone. We'll see about those appeals. Have a good night.